Tongli Martial Arts Association family. This is Kyle Whiteley, Fifth Step. Thought I'd make several video blogs to explain Wu Ji Quan Fa and Tongli Martial Arts, where we're going. I've had a lot of people ask me, where are we going? What's going to happen with the system now that Master Garaga's passed away? I've had to think about it a lot, to be completely honest. It's been a very busy couple of years. It's been just over 2 years since he passed away. It's still somewhat surreal that he has passed away. I'm not really sure what details people want or don't have, what to say. This is awkward to me to some degree to talk to a camera. But what I do know for sure is that Tom looked at us as his extended family. He really did. Through 1998, when I first met him, until he passed away in 2024, he really was a mentor and a father figure to me and to many of us, and helped us to develop. I'd always ask him, what's his vision for the system? And he said, I want to develop leaders that can help society ultimately to be better. There was an ethic he really loved. I mean, he gave his life to the vision he said he learned from Doc Huang, his teacher. I went over the last couple years, even up to, in 2024, I took another class with Tom, long set of classes. And I went over with him, what was your experience like? What was training to you? Really interesting couple classes, almost just like doing a mini martial arts biography for just Tom. Why did he get into martial arts? And I plan on kind of rolling that out in some of these short videos. I don't know how to put it. Basically, this is going to be all sorts of information about Wu Ji Quan Fa. Let's start with the name. And it kind of gives a lot of his vision. Wu Ji Quan Fa is not the name of what he learned from Doc Huang and from the Huang family. Per what Tom said, he was not given permission to publicly say that he was teaching the Huang family system. The Huang family doesn't really even announce that they have their own family system. They really are old school, from what he told me. Granted, I never got to meet them directly. But I trust Tom, and I pass it on like it's my lineage, because it is. It's a heritage that I accept, and I hope that you all look at it the same way. They were old school. You don't share the family secrets. The point was to have a family tradition, and it didn't have to be scripted, or it didn't have to be constrained in its seeking of progress by popular opinion and the politics that plague so many martial arts. It was a family approach to things. They would teach publicly various styles if they wanted to teach martial arts for a living, like RQE Huang. I think I've seen some YouTube videos, which sometimes it says RQE and Doc, and Tom said the two were confused. They were cousins, relatively close in age. From what Tom said, Doc was the Grandmaster after RQE, and Doc was his official teacher and didn't teach a lot of people. Didn't enjoy teaching a ton. He wasn't like RQE loved to teach and would teach all the time. Taught publicly the 5 Animals, Shaolin, and other things, Hongjia or Hungar. He would teach different sets, and that was his profession. And then he had the family system to teach his own family members and those that were in those circles. And that's the way it was in old school Chinese systems, especially the ones. Ours dates back to the Warring States period. It was before the Warring States period, if you know Chinese history, and it survived through that period, and that's kind of its, for lack of a better, that was what it was raised in. It really didn't have a name. Wu Ji Quan Fa was, like a lot of things, Tom made a business out of doing this, and in 1994 was my understanding, shortly before Doc passed away, forgive my dates, he was given permission to teach the system officially as the system. Before that, he was given permission to teach some of the concepts under the umbrella of Kempo. And Tom was a 9th degree black belt in Kempo. He was he was awarded that, and you go up to 8th degree, and then you have to be kind of voted to be a 9th degree. Is what he always reported and showed me. Spoken with Mike Pick. Tom always said Mike Pick should be considered the Grand Master of Kenpo after Ed Parker passed away. He said there was a splintered lineage, but that Mike Pick and that group should be considered the legitimate lineage, is the way Tom looked at it, and always spoke very highly of Mike Pick. And Mike Pick called me after Tom passed away and spoke very highly of Tom. And it was quite an honor to speak with Grandmaster Pick. And it's like I don't know him, but it's almost like an uncle from another, like a distant uncle. And maybe I can meet him someday and talk to him more. But so Tom started with that, and so he was still teaching Kenpo. He taught in California, but he was highly influenced, and at least what our lineage comes from is of Wu Ji Quan Fa, means all origin martial method. Times probably all of us saw the pamphlet, that the family had gone out, and over the years they developed a style, and they kept incorporating, and they had analyzed at least 1,400 plus martial styles and many military schools of combatives, and then also the several spiritual and other schools into this composite system, which he always said was true, right? And that is what happened. I think sometimes that gives the impression that we have 1,400 styles that we teach, and that's not really the case. We have one style that we teach. The original mother style was Ge, Jian, Pai. Ge means Ge family, Jian means sword, and Pai is a style. That was the one that was the mother style that survived through the Warring States period. And as a family tradition after that period, they would go and pay, when they'd hear of famous martial arts, they'd go pay them and go learn and go analyze and try to add it in. And they were very picky. One of the things that is missed is that we don't add just to add. That slows you down. And so sometimes I think we get a view, if you weren't around Tom enough, and that's not meant to be exclusionary, if you weren't around him enough, it seems like the system is huge. And there certainly is a lot of material in it. However, the actual system, the core material, is very small and is taught very early. That's why the 5th step wears the white shirt with the black dragon, the same as the beginner and the fundamental student, for 2 reasons. Number one, to show that the mastery of that truly beginning fundamental material is all there is. You would hear Tom share a model often, and that's what Doc shared with him, of that, beginners study basics. Intermediate students study techniques, but advanced students, they go back to those basics and they master them to a different degree. And that's what you really use when you're fighting, those fundamentals. And so really when you're learning techniques, you're learning new combinations and examples of fundamentals, much like learning a language. First you learn your letters and your grammar and all that fun stuff. And then later you start seeing examples of how it's used in different styles, gives you it. And eventually you're your own creative user of that language. And fighting is a language. Combat is a language. My light here turned off a few times. See if I can get it to, there it goes. These will definitely be rambly videos, so I hope you enjoy it. It's like when we get together, I'm just looking at it like I'm getting together with you guys, and I hope that in your downtime you can listen to these and they add some benefit. You guys are what's left. We're all what's left of Tom's work. He worked 60 plus years, and a lot of it in this, 30 or more in this, to pass this system on. Wu Ji Quan Fa was a name. Actually, Guy Lindsay was the one that was consulted to make that name. Before that, Tom used the name Hua Kenpo is what it would read as, but you'd pronounce it Hua Gun Bo. Gun Bo is a particular term in Chinese that means like brutal, kind of raw fighting. The way that we know it, the way we love it, right? Like, I remember some of the best compliments I got after a demo was like, you guys don't move like martial artists. You guys move like some sort of like street fighters, right? And there's a lot of that. Like, that's what works. That's what works when you're fighting. And it's very non-classical, as you guys know. And it's that way by design. It was designed to be truly an effective fighting method. That's why the term Quan Fa seemed more appropriate than just Quan, like a style. But it's a method. It's a system. And I, for one, and many of us that are senior instructors that are left and still are going, and several others, I plan to carry this on. I teach it to my family. I teach it to my my close friends that are a lot of you guys, and we have a very, it's an honor and a privilege to get to pass it on to those that I get to work with. It really is, and I don't get a chance to say that very much, but it truly has been through the years, and it is. I take it as a real duty. When someone spends their time with me, I want to make sure I give you the best material, and that I personally practice it to the point where I can show it well and I can explain it well, and that was a huge motivator for Tom. That kept him young for all the years, the way he put it. Kept him motivated, and when that kind of when he didn't have access to that, it was more difficult, right? That's part of his what he really loved to do. And so with that, I see us as like an orphan branch off of the family. That's the way he described it. We don't have direct ties to that family, but I think their tradition is marvelous, and I plan to continue developing it and going on. And I was privileged when I got Third Step in 2004. Tom brought me in on helping to bridge the system. I took it as a great compliment. He said that I have a good eye for bridging things and for practicality, and so I've just tried to find, all right, what's really essential? What do we really need to focus on? If we're too large, it just doesn't pass on, and how are we going to communicate the core method of this system in a way where people can really understand and get early and then develop through their own life? I want people to be able to develop it sooner. It does bring a certain great confidence to have real martial ability. Paradoxically, it makes you more peaceful. I spent most of my 20s almost living like a monastery type environment as a monk, just training martial arts and studying philosophy and meditating and exercising, and that was my life, and I loved it. And that was my training experience. Very different from most people, and a lot of you probably had your own miniature or large versions of that same experience, or some of you want to create that for yourself, and the system can be a means to do that. So when we say the system, that's why we call it the system. It really had no name. Tom made a couple names because you had to have something when you're running a school. What are you teaching? And the same with the curriculum. The curriculum was an abstraction that was made for us. That there's a fundamentals course and a basics course and all the rest. Tom made that. There was no English, there's no Chinese equivalent of that. He just said, when we went through those classes, he was like, I went and started training, and I loved what I was learning. They were teaching me to hit harder and to move faster, they were teaching me a mindset, and it's a very complete system. And so, over the years, and then eventually they just said one day, they said, hey, you're going to do a test next week. And that was his first step test. And he doesn't remember how long he was into training when they invited him for that. And that is very indicative of traditional Chinese martial arts systems, right? It's very nebulous in terms of curriculum. They don't like to have a lot of ranking. It's not ABC. It's not like Western academics, and Westerners like it to be like that. But its true character never was like that. And some of the updates that I made to the curriculum, the way I teach it, and some of the way that Tom, honestly, his last 7, 8, 9 years of teaching it, some of you will notice he was teaching what used to be considered advanced material and at an earlier stage, and it would bug some people, and others would be like, these new students don't understand what they're getting, and a lot of times they sometimes we didn't and don't always know how cool some of the material is. But his reasoning for that is really with the system, there's some stuff that need to be covered right in the beginning, the foundational stuff, which in a nutshell is going to be power drills, most important. And that's a good side tangent to move over for a second. Landing on a 5 foundations approach to explaining the system. Wu Ji Quan Fa really literally means 5. You could say extremes. Ji doesn't have a direct translation into English. These would mean extremes or poles or foundations is probably the best way to understand it. Like Tai Chi Chuan, that's the grand terminus, these 2 foundational forces of reality. Wu Ji Quan Fa, these 5 foundation martial method, or Wu also as a symbolic term, almost meaning like, and they use it as like Wu Jin Dian, which means a 5 metal shop, which is like the equivalent in the old time of a Home Depot, where just you could find whatever you needed. That was what Guy Lindsay was trying to say when he proposed the name Wu Ji Quan Fa to Tom in the 90s. And I guess Tom was able to run that by Doc. And Doc never liked the name Hua Gunbo. He says it sounds like an English guy trying to make a Chinese name. And that's fair because Tom didn't really speak Chinese fluently. He always wanted to learn but never got a chance to do that. A lot of the system began to make a lot more sense to me when I formally became fluent in Chinese and could read and understand Chinese systems and a lot of their culture and the way they think. And it really clarified a lot of my misunderstandings of things. And I want to share that with people so you know what you spent your time for. A lot of you spent a decade plus of your life immersed in this. And I, even if you're not training actively and don't come to train, I want you to enjoy these videos to know more about the system. You're probably curious enough to do that. But going back to the point I was making, with Wu Ji Quan Fa, that was the proposed name, and Doc really liked that name. He thought it was really good with kind of their approach and the way they looked at things. And so Tom ran with it, and that's where the name was born. It's a good start. Where does Wu Ji Quan Fa come in? Now, with that said, while it describes the system and the way we teach it really well in Chinese, it is a massive struggle to communicate that in a way that doesn't make the people you tell it to scratch their head like this. Just be like, huh? You say, what do you study? You say, oh, Wu Ji Quan Fa. Like, Wu Ji what? And we've all had the experience, right? You're like trying to say it, and you're like, oh yeah, it's this cool mix system. Like, oh, cool. What is it? Where does it come from? Nowadays with MMA and jiu-jitsu and all this other stuff out there, like it's just a mess sometimes to communicate it. So it's I'm not a salesman. I don't like to do that. Usually for me, if they don't want it, I don't really care. Like I have it and my friends have it, and it passes on word of mouth to those that need to find it. So that's probably going to be a lot more my attitude going forward. I'm not super interested in marketing this to the world. I just want us to have a good, thriving group where those that are training really know what they're training in and have great access to it. And if we're, right now, from my understanding, if we're 50 strong, I'd rather be 50 strong than 250 thin, if that makes sense. And so if we're 10 strong, I'd rather be that way. And that's my mentality. And however many we get, if we get 1,000 strong, that's fine. Through people teaching other people, there's no way I can manage that. It's one of those to where it was meant to be passed on, by a teacher, a shifu, to a group of apprentices, 2D. It was meant to be that way. There's another word that really takes a little bit of understanding to get. Tom, as you guys all know, why we call him Tom instead of shifu, and even though that would be certainly a fair title to give him, and we don't have any of the formalized hazing of a lot of Chinese systems and a lot of Japanese systems, and even now the Western systems have that same thing. Westernized versions of jiu-jitsu and all this other stuff. It still does that, the Filipino ones. We're friends. Shifu it should be looked at much like the way that electricians and the like grow up. You have your full-on electrician. That's your shifu. You have kind of your journeyman. That's in the middle. That's like a jiaolian, like a first step. Shifu would mean like third step and above. A fully qualified instructor. And it's not always indicative, as Tom pointed out, that there are some of his most talented practitioners maybe only stopped at second step. And he was quick to say that. So, but it's third step really means you're able to not only be a talented practitioner, but you're able to create others and know the whole system and pass the whole thing on, is kind of the idea. You could pass on the majority of it. Fifth step should mean you can pass the whole thing on. Is what it's supposed to mean. I think a lot of us, as I talk with Fifth Steps, Bruce and Adam, Tom left it in 3 of our hands officially, and you have Aaron Hunt that was promoted to Fifth Step, a generation before us. I still keep in contact with, and then 3 of us in 2012, and keep in contact with all of them. Everyone's got kind of a different point of view and quite different even as martial artists. And so it's an interesting thing that Tom left for us. And I love those guys like brothers. And they're all like big brothers to me. And so that's kind of the state of the system in a lot of ways. That rambling explanation. That's the name. Kind of went over the name a little bit. Tom left it that way First step and second step being Jiaolian, instructors would be the Chinese equivalent. And obviously Tudi, means, kind of the apprentices. And that's the way it was meant to be passed on. And the way he started to look at it, especially, didn't really care if the studio was going to be open. If we get a place to train, I don't plan on changing it. I don't want to make it about money. Tom never wanted it to be about money. You can't eat and justify doing things without, he would always say, I charge for my time. I don't, and I share the information as a gift. That is the heritage too that I plan on passing on. I don't want that to be the main reason, and that's part of why we don't get a giant rent over our heads and things like that. We don't want to have to bow the quality of what we do, and in my opinion, in our opinion, I'm talking especially with Bruce and Adam, the same mentality. We don't want to have to compromise what we consider to be the integrity and the intent of the system. We want it to do kind of the unbridled good that it can do in your life, and so not be restrained by politics and public opinion and appearances and things like that. So the system in a nutshell, what the family tried to perfect was the art of combat, and that's combat in more of a battlefield setting. If the reason for fighting doesn't rise to that, your best self-defense is don't fight. If it doesn't rise to that, you are fighting for your ego. And a lot of our tactics are just simply, number one, going to get you in trouble legally. I can tell you that as a professional in that world. A lot of trouble. And number two, they're just not appropriate even morally. But when your life is truly on the line, and you can easily, and anyone else could easily articulate a deadly threat as being thrust upon you, then they may be all that you can do, and you're facing a situation where it's die or use those kind of skills. And that's where it fits on a fighting side. With that said, the whole point of it's a Gong Fu system. And Gong Fu, you'll hear me say a lot, the Gong principle means the power of consistent work. Fu, as a character, means person. So Gong Fu means the power of consistent work in a person. In the family's view, and in most old school Chinese martial arts, that is an inescapable principle. It's always happening. Every day you're practicing good Gong Fu or bad Gong Fu. You're either making a net deposit and you're getting better each day, or you're making a net withdrawal and you're getting worse and depleted in your health, in your wellness, internally. And that's the whole real point of learning a martial art, considering it's an art, right? It is still an art. We're not out here having a fight on a battlefield. We're not here trying to compete in tournaments. That's not what this is about. It's like learning an art. When you go learn how to sculpt or you learn how to dance, it is an art. It's about self-expression. It's about self-development. It's called xiu yang in Chinese, which is to raise and to nourish the self. Gai shan, sometimes called that way, to make positive change in oneself. That's the intent behind Gong Fu. Probably heard it described in the layman's kind of term, maybe not quite as knowledgeable of a Chinese translation as hard work or effort or mastery to achieve mastery over time. That's okay, but it's better probably to go literal with the radicals and understand that. And so the idea of Gong Fu is to take your art that you study, which in this case is the art of combat, and through those movements and practices, you develop your health and wellness in a way that can last through your lifetime. And so the other side of the system, the non-combative side, which from my understanding, Tom began to really focus on more in his latter years of teaching. I met him at the bridge of his teaching, at his early years and then his latter years. In his latter years, he was a lot more focused on that, which is pretty normal for a lot of masters. As they get older, you start to realize how few of the time you really need to fight anybody, and how often, every day, you need the skills of xiu yang, of the internal development, of the personal development. And without that, you just wither away. That's also why the last ranking, fifth step, means master healer of mankind. Be a good start for a different video, maybe another side tangent, but the rankings in the system: first step, true beginner; second step, master fighter; third step, master of basics or a master of tactics; fourth step, master strategist; fifth step, master healer, meaning healer of mankind, and actual physical healing skills. This was never exclusionary, like in fifth step, you study this, and in fourth step. All that stuff was being taught from the beginning. But essentially it was more of a, a measurement of when what things showed up. By second step, you can really get to a high level of fighting. You can go beyond that to a level of tactics to where it goes even further. And then obviously past that, strategy just takes a long time to really develop. And then obviously the past that is the personal development. You start to realize that all that stuff, all the fighting, what's it good for if you don't develop or maintain yourself? And so that's the way it was meant to be. They're all intertwined. You're learning all of it from the beginning. It's like cooking several things, and some things take longer to cook than others. And so some things are going to get ready before others. So some of them you start talking about from the beginning, knowing that it takes that long for them to arrive. And so our system never really held anything back when Tom got to teach it to us. That's what he loved. He didn't have to hold material back. There is kind of an old culture of Chinese hazing. You teach kind of the wrong thing for a while, and then later you correct it to be the right thing. We've weeded a lot of that out. But some of us experienced a lot of it where you're like, we were told to do this in the beginning, and now we're told to do this, and it seems different. Some of that isn't even hazing. It's just that it's the way you have to explain it when it's a kid system too. It's like, for example, to explain some things to a kid, I can get a child to throw a front kick from the very beginning. When you try to tell them to turn their toes diagonal in or diagonal out, it just confuses their brain. So you have them do a front kick for a long time because they can do that. Even though in reality, as you get more advanced, you never throw the toes straight up. You're always torquing them one way or another on impact. Does that mean that you were lying when you said throw a front kick? No, just you're saying what they could understand and not making a big deal out of it. Otherwise, you're teaching a dissertation to people that just want to kick something. And it was meant to be a system that could be taught in little pieces to their children from the very beginning and to be there throughout their life. We learn it in a very different way, through seminars, through classes, through self-practice, through videos. So it's still there, but it's we're having to adapt to the format that we learn in. With all that said, I could go on and on. I've got to close the video out at a certain point. I hope you found this useful. I'm going to do a series of these, probably go over a lot of the same things multiple times, but hopefully you can watch it, and it's a way I can reach out to some of you that I haven't seen for a long time. And I hope you know that I have thought of all of you. I think of the whole community as my brothers and sisters and want to see everyone excel and really look forward to seeing everyone again. I hope you can make it out to some of the seminars. Feel free to call me and catch up if you want. I do get some downtime. I'm busy, but I'm not too busy to talk to people. I'll get back to you if I can, as soon as I can. Not if I can. I'll get back to you. It just takes me some time. And yeah, I really hope all of you are well. I miss Tom a lot. I do fully intend to carry the system on. I have a lot of confidence, especially having seen all of his notes, that he had been able to go over everything with me prior to his passing. And I'd imagine with the other fifth steps as well, they feel pretty confident, I think, when they see it, the notes that are there, and as we share it amongst people. So we have it. It's a matter of what we do with it, how we develop it. A martial art never gets better than the community that practices it. We have the potential in the system and the material. I want to get that out so all of us can begin practicing it. Iron sharpens iron, so the better that other people in this system get, the better I can practice with more skilled practitioners, and it makes me better. And that's the way Tom looked at it, That's the way I look at it. And it's an honor to work with you, like I've said many times, and I'm going to sign off for now. It's kind of like signing off. We'll chat more in this series about Wu Ji Quan Fa, where it comes from and where it's going.